Come to rest. Quiet down. Quit chewing. And let me ask one more thing. Once they get started, make yourself real comfortable. Once they get started, don't rock in these squeaky chairs either.
That means you.
You at rest there, Steve?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean. That's Jamie, Don, Steven, Lynn, Ella, and Asha. We have a big group. So today we're going to present in Stanford in 20 years. You can imagine we have a lot to talk about, and we could talk about it forever. But our group decided to focus on 3 topics, which are demographics, education, and technology of Stanford in 20 years. Now, before we could talk about future, we have to go back and talk about beginning. So Glenn is going to talk about founding grant. So it's established by Jane and Leland Stanford.
So it's pretty obvious. You want to talk about Stanford in 20 years? You go way back to the beginning. How far back? 125 years this year, right? Let's go even further back. 1885, which was 131 years ago. I'll set the stage for you a little bit, set the scene. Leland Jr. had died 1 year earlier. So these are people in deep grieving and deep mourning. But as we all know from the Stanford mythology that we're all inculcated in, they decided to express their grief in a really positive way, and that's by creating the university. The legal act by which they created the university is called the Founding Grant, or here's the official title, Grant Founding and Endowing the Leland Stanford Junior University. So they wrote this legal deed in 1885. The university would begin functioning in 1891. So even though we're going backwards, this founding grant, I'm going to argue for you, is the most forward-looking of all of our university documents. So no matter how much our predictions for the future in 20 years are now, this founding grant, projecting 125 or 130 years in the future, was the real future-looking document. So I want to spend just a few minutes on it. The Stanfords decided that they would not only give property and money and establish the leadership of the university, all sorts of legal things, but they also wanted to establish the mission of the university. The first thing they talked about, keep in mind that I'm condensing 19th century, very elaborate sort of prose. It's a great read. I highly recommend that you read it. We have we have a link to the founding grant in the notes at the end. So I'll just summarize in a few words. They said that Stanford's nature would be to be a university of the highest grade. So this is best in the world. Remember, 1885, there is no university. There's not even a building. There's just land they're getting. That's a pretty bold statement. They also said that Stanford would have all things necessary for the cultivation and enlargement of the mind, right? I'm going to go through really quickly a list of the sorts of activities, the sorts of departments that the university would have 5 years before anything is built, 6 years before the place opened. You'll recognize in the way they expressed it some of the predecessors of our modern departments. They said Stanford would have mechanical and agricultural institutes, art galleries, conservatories, laboratories, and the big kicker, which I already said, all things necessary for cultivation and enlargement of the mind. It's a bold vision, it's a broad vision, and it's not just to prepare farmers or agriculture or industrialists, to prepare well-rounded people. They also decided that they have a mission toward the students, and that mission, keep in mind that for them, all the Stanford students through all of the centuries are representing their own son, Leland. They wanted to prepare all of Stanford students to qualify for personal success and fulfillment in life, right? And I'm sorry, direct usefulness in life. So personal success and direct usefulness, of course, is a broad definition, but this was really their main goal. So the Stanfords defined what their university would be, what its obligation to students would be, and what its obligation to the world would be. Also pretty broad. To promote the public welfare by exercising an influence on behalf of humanity and civilization. Pretty big, right? Pretty bold thinking. Well, these were big, and they're not only for the foundation of the university. They weren't only looking ahead 6 years, they were looking ahead 130 years. But they weren't the only ones that looked ahead in Stanford's history. This map that we decided to use from the university archives actually is, probably can't read it, we made it a little bit bigger here. Map showing Stanford University, present and future. So this is 1928's version of the present and the future. If you look closely, they got a lot of things right. Some things they didn't quite get right. There's no Redwood City here, for example. They should have thought big. But there's a lot that's right in 1928. A lot we can see and recognize the shape of our campus. Even though things change, there's an awful lot that stays the same. University archives also contain another fascinating document, among many, about the future of the university. This is one that I discovered. I work in the libraries, as you know, and my friends, the university archivists, when I was talking to them about this assignment, they said, oh, we just noticed this crazy document from 1987 called Stanford in 2010, a scenario. It's kind of like 2001, A Space Odyssey, right? This is for a board of trustees retreat. They commissioned this sort of sci-fi scenario about what Stanford would be like in 20 years or 23 years. And it's pretty grim. They wanted to have a lot of negative, prepare the trustees for what happens if we can never have good relations with the city of Palo Alto. What happens if the economy tanks? What happens if this happens or that happens? And some of the things they got right, for example, this is a direct quote that speaks to my profession. Computer-based exercises are incorporated into most upper division courses, even in the humanities. So in 1987 they said this, right? There was already a computer revolution, but there wasn't much computers in humanities classrooms. Now there are. Some things are not true at all. For example, I said this is a dire prediction. One of their dire predictions was Berkeley turns out to be the great university of the United States. And Stanford, people just aren't even interested.
That's what they think in Berkeley.
Some of the predictions came partially true. For example, here's another quote. In 2010, well over 40% of the student body would be minority students, and the Stanford student body would be more geographically representative of the nation in 2010. Asha is going to talk about the actual demographics in 2016, and we'll see that they were not far off, but not exactly right.
Thank you, Glenn. So I'm going to follow talking about the application trends at Stanford. Who are the students coming here, and what are they doing here? So according to the Time magazine, by 2020, 65% of jobs will require a college education. So the projected numbers for 2035 is even higher. So we're going to take a look. This slide is showing the Stanford applications and admissions trends. So the green chart, the green bar chart going high up there is the applications, volume applications over the past many years, from 1950. We have data from 1950 to the admissions office. Whereas the red line sliding down at the bottom of the chart is the admit rate at Stanford. We're going to move to a second chart, but I zoom in into the last 20 years of data. You can see that on the top line is the applicant admission rate. So we're keeping our population pretty constant at Stanford. So about 2,400 in a year of admits. Whereas with a high volume of application, our admit rate this past year has been a record low of 5%. You have a 5% chance of getting into Stanford now. This is the lowest. With a state-of-the-art campus and high faculty profile in the middle of Silicon Valley, and the rich endowment that allows Stanford to keep providing a high-class education, we predict that Stanford in 20 years will be as competitive as ever. Our admit rate will stay around the 5% mark. Everyone knows that our world is becoming more global. Our world of the 21st century is more interconnected in many different dimensions. This slide here displays the trend in student geographical data over the past 20 years. So we are embracing a shrinking world. The university's reputation as an innovation epicenter, drawing young people from all over the world. The numbers here speak for themselves, from 4% to 11%, from 13% in grad school to 30% from non-US students. We predict that Stanford will receive increasing applications from the four corners of the world and will carry on admitting higher caliber international students, therefore benefiting from a more diversified student body. As Stanford educates the leaders of the future in such a rich environment, this creates new synergies that can only strengthen the quality of education at STEM. You're not looking at the underground London Tube Underground. This is a ranking of degrees conferred at Stanford. And I wanted to highlight the red and orange. Fact, computer science has quickly and steadily displaced other degrees at Stanford and has become the #1 ranked degree company. And engineering is following at a close third. So this is data for the past 10 years of degrees at Stanford. Our location, being in the heart of the Silicon Valley, our close ties to so many companies in the area and having coached so many of them. With a rising tuition cost, it's not surprising to see the shift happening in computer science. Computer science, CS, salaries are indeed high in the area, opportunities are great here. Computers and software are displacing entire industries and making other industries more effective. So while we are seeing an increase in offerings in joint degrees at the graduate level, for example, we have CS and MBA, we have CS and law degrees, joint degrees. We predict that in 20 years at the undergraduate level, while computer science and engineering will still be leading degrees at Stanford, we'll have many more new multidisciplinary programs that will provide a balance. And Stanford will stay true to its charter, producing well-rounded students. Jamie will now take a deeper look at education and shift.
So in terms of education at Stanford in 20 years, I think the biggest topic at the forefront is big data and learning analytics specifically. We believe that big data and learning analytics will become much more deeply integrated in education. We'll be using data to drive a lot of the curriculum, to study student behavior, and to generate this data, we believe that everything will be basically monitored. We'll have sensors on everything, sort of like the Internet of Things, including wearable technology, for instance. It might even be possible in the future to track student attentiveness in class and to gauge how awake they are and how they're feeling. So with learning analytics, and I'll explain this image that you're kind of seeing here. What this is a relational map of a variety of subjects taught at universities and how they connect to each other. And sort of by linking and studying these, we predict that we will be able to predict a student's progression and their competencies. So with learning analytics, we believe that competency-based learning, which has been known for a while, will become the forefront of education. Curriculum can actually be tailored to the individual student depending on what they need to know, exactly when they need to know it to get to the next level of understanding. This is also known as the zone of proximal development. It's like this region where it's just the just right amount of information for a person to comprehend it and move on. With this new information and new data, we believe that there will be research and studies on this data, and we will come up with new teaching pedagogies. The traditional formats and models of teaching will be drastically different, we predict, in 20 years, and we might not even actually know what they are today, because they haven't been discovered yet. But one of the new teaching pedagogies that we believe will take the forefront is the rise of gamification and simulations. So instead of having traditional homework and drills and memorization, or even just using calculators, we believe that education will become much more interactive. So just as an example here, this is a photo of a student playing a game called Septris that I helped produce at the School of Medicine. It was designed for medical students, residents, and physicians. And the way it kind of came about was that with the rise of mobile devices, with the rise of connectivity, internet, we found, lecturers were complaining that students were not really paying attention in class anymore. They wanted to do something different. They wanted to engage the students more. They see them on the phones, like in the elevator, walking around. Why can't they be learning at that time? Why can't they be doing something fun, but also engaging the other students as well? As an example of this, also in recent news, Microsoft announced that they purchased Minecraft EDU, which is a modified version of Minecraft designed to be used in classes. It's been tailored to teach even elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids about physics, about circuits, about programming. Another advantage of gamification and these simulations is that, of course, they generate the data for the learning analytics that can be used in research. And this data, of course, can be used to improve teaching processes to, as I mentioned, customize the curriculum per student, but at the same time, it can also be used for assessment as well. So it might be in the future that instead of taking, for instance, in the medical residencies, what are known as shelf exams, you might actually play a game instead to actually get your certification. Or physicians even joked that their patients might start asking them, well, what was your sepsis score, or something like that. In addition to gamification and simulation, we also see an increase in connectedness. So currently we have what are known as massively open online courses, also known as MOOCs. They have recently come to the rise in popularity, and still there's a lot of unknowns about them, their efficacy, and really how to run them, and so forth. What we're seeing and what we believe is that these MOOCs will actually evolve into what we call massively open online communities, not just courses. What we're finding is that already these courses, even though they're designed to run for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, that the people taking the courses stay on to the course. They continue engaging with others who have similar interests, they keep learning more, and it kind of moves on. With this increased connectedness, we believe that the educational communication style will be much more about collaboration instead of the traditional sage on the stage lecture style. You're already kind of seeing that with flipped classroom, where I believe Alex mentioned that earlier, that these lectures are being recorded online so that students can learn the material ahead of time, and they come to the classroom to discuss with other students and engage in learning. We also believe that with this connectedness and collaboration, that interdisciplinary offerings will increase, as Asha mentioned. We're already starting to see it, but we believe that it will become much more prevalent. Engineering and business, medicine and business, engineering and medicine, and so forth. I mean, the combinations are literally endless. We also believe that online degrees will supplement, but not replace the traditional learning spaces and the university. Stanford is still going to be around in 20 years. It's not going to be all online. That FaceTime cannot replace, virtual meetings, video conferencing cannot replace FaceTime between students and faculty, and even students between other students. Lastly, we also believe that Stanford, of course, will have a physical presence still. As you can see around campus, there's no slowing in development and construction, and we believe that that will continue in 20 years. But we believe that classrooms will change. You won't see your traditional lecture halls anymore with 400 seats in a semicircle. Instead, you'll see smaller classrooms designed to be configured for various kinds of interactive activities. So here we have an example of a room that can be moved around and configured with 6-person groups, 8-person groups, 10-person groups. You can put around in a circle if you wanted to have a group discussion. And we believe that we'll see much more of those classrooms. This is just an example at the school medicine again. And these types of rooms, are the most popular rooms by far. It's just completely booked all the time. And in fact, we're starting to see declines in the traditional use, the use of traditional lecture halls. And so I talked a lot about the front end of what we kind of digest from education, but Steve will actually give us some insight about the back end, the technology that kind of goes behind the scenes to support all of this.
Yeah, I mean, so if we're going to talk about anything 20 years in the future, technology is going to come up. Particularly at Stanford, I think we're all familiar with the intimate relationship that this university has in the larger tech sphere. And so, as up and coming leaders in the university, we actually here we have some of our own opinions. We also wanted to get kind of a broader contextual idea from current leaders. So we met with Bill Klepsch, who's going to give an idea of what 20 years means.
If you think 20 years back, there was no Google, there was no iPhone. I mean, the whole landscape of technology has changed completely.
And yeah, and so that when we think about this, we know it, we see it, right? And the biggest way that we interact with technology though, is through our devices. We've throughout the years.
If you think of technology, what?
So throughout the years, I mean, we've seen this progress already. We saw the adoption of laptops. We then saw cellular phones. Now, our mobile devices, our smartphones and tablets. And I think we think this is naturally something that's going to continue on. And as Jimmy said, we're not going to see traditional classrooms disappear, but we are going to see a bit of that cord being cut from being strictly tethered to these traditional rooms. Not needing to worry about the logistics of scheduling a meeting room when people can jump on their phone from wherever they are, wherever is convenient. And despite the advances that we're seeing in hardware, no matter how fast mobile technology increases, it's still always going to lag behind our stationary systems between our servers or supercomputers. So there is still going to be a necessity for those on the back end to be performing our computational intensive tasks. Voice recognition, automatic transcription of lectures, et cetera, et cetera. And so as the classrooms change, as the way we collaborate change, so is the content. And just like the classrooms, we're still going to have physical books surely in 20 years, but we're going to see less of a reliance on them. When you think, just thinking about it, right, if you're collaborating on a video chat, it's difficult to just point out where in the book you are. So we're going to see ebooks adopted a lot. And now, this isn't without its caveats, though. While there's a lot of speculation that this can drive down costs, it's easier to distribute, it's easier to update, we now also have the issue of it's a lot more difficult to sell a used ebook to someone. So we still need to be vigilant that we don't see this price creep, and that we can still distribute both cheaply and easily this information. But as we centralize this, as we kind of move the key, put all the keys to the castle in one place, security is absolutely going to be key. Not only do we have the digitization of student records, but now we're talking about their entire course load, the papers that they write, the opinions that they have, the interactions in the course room, and it's absolutely imperative that we owe this to our students, to our staff, our faculty, that this information is going to be kept secure. A lot we can speculate on. I mean, one of the biggest things, of course, is multi-factor authentication. Living in a world just with passwords, that's not going to do it when there's so much to be gained from access to this information. And now, if we want all of these nice things, we need the infrastructure that's going to support it. And so, traditionally, we think of the brick and mortar university have been the pioneers for wired technology. And we're going to need to see these increases in bandwidth, increase in support for wireless connectivity too, as we mentioned, as these devices are no longer physically connected to one another. And with this, we asked Kim Mirlo about what this means, what we need to provide here moving forward. So we've got a big group here to wrap up.
To solve the large-scale scientific problems, not only of today, but the future, is going to require technologies at a scale that we don't have today. And it's going to require not just the hardware technologies, but the software codes and applications and programming and analytic methodologies that leverage those hardware resources.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway there is we know some of what we need, but we don't know everything. But we need that support so that we can put the right tools into the right people's hands. And so Dawn's actually going to talk a little bit more about what that means about having the right people in control and being a preeminent university.
So my part here is talking about the pros and cons of Stanford being a preeminent university within the United States. I'm going to start off with the video here from Ruth Marenshaw, where she talks about how Stanford is the ideal place to be.
Every day there's something new happening. And you have to sort of keep up. And at Stanford, this is one of the ideal places to be in those roles because you have the opportunity to work with the researchers who actually invented some of the technologies you're deploying.
Mm-hmm. So that is the start of the pros of why Stanford is preeminent, because it has the best and brightest minds. We're here to pros and the cons of America's preeminent university. Students and faculty, they want to make a difference by coming here to Stanford, and which includes, there's 20 Nobel laureates and 4 Pulitzer Prize winners. Stanford also provides more resources. There's a large number of alumni, research, there's great students, they recruit the best faculty, staff, and students. Stanford is seen as a leader in education and research. And of course, there's always a chance of, chance to be featured in a Will Ferrell movie, like The Apprentice. As for the cons for Stanford, it's always under the eyes of scrutiny across the United States. So it's always going to be compared to other great universities around the world. There's going to be high pressure for students to be more innovative, be original, be leaders. This is also where students face their first failures. After being great at everything they've done so far, they come to Stanford only to find this is where they first start to fail. Stanford is also very expensive, but you can also qualify for other funding. Stanford is one of the country's strongest financial aid programs, where 77% of undergraduates that graduate debt-free. And within Stanford, there's always going to be competition for folks all around the United States and the world to be able to get into it, which means, as Asha said earlier, the admittance rates of Stanford is always going to keep on moving down as more people try to get into it. Now I'm going to pass things over to Al.
Stanford was founded in 1885, and today is the year of 2016. So in 130 years, we believe Stanford's vision stays true. When Stanford was founded, a lot of departments were anticipated from the very beginning. And today we have 7 schools. Graduate School of Business, School of Post, Energy and Environment Sciences, Graduate School of Education, School of Engineering, School of Humanities and Sciences, School of Law, School of Medicine. In 1885, Stanford was founded with the purpose to promote public welfare by exercising influence on behalf of humanity. We believe this vision stays true. Stanford Medicine is one of the leaders in the world by providing exceptional clinical care, advancing medical education, and making biomedical discoveries for the benefit of all patients in the world. In 1885, Stanford was founded with the objective towards students' personal success and direct usefulness in life. We believe this vision stays true. Every year, Stanford produces hundreds of highly qualified and successful specialists that influence the world every day. So now, Sean has some nice presentation.
Right. So instead of me actually repeating everyone what they just have said, we're already past the time. I'm just going to show you a video. We asked those leaders that we interviewed what they think of Stanford in one word. I know it might be really difficult to say, but we asked them, what do you think is Stanford in one word? So we want to share that with you. And in closing, we also asked our prospect future students, little kids, what they think of Stanford. So we want to share that with you.
Stanford is thought of as the best.
Mind-boggling.